Picture Ryan. He's 31 years old, and he just got an email from his lender that made him feel like an adult in a way nothing else ever has. He's been pre-approved for $420,000. He reads it 3 times, he screenshots it, he calls his girlfriend, and they spend 45 minutes on Zillow together looking at houses they couldn't look at last week. They find one. 4 bedrooms, updated kitchen, a backyard with a deck, listed at $409,000. They drive by it that evening. They sit outside in the car, looking at the lit windows and talking about where the couch would go. Here's what Ryan doesn't know. The lender who approved him for $420,000 has no idea what his grocery bill is. They don't know about the $480 a month he sends to his parents. They don't know about the car he's planning to replace next year. They don't know that the property taxes on that $409,000 house are $7,200 a year. They know his income. They know his existing debts, and based on those 2 numbers, they determined he can technically carry the loan. Technically is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Because here's the thing about what a bank approves you for. It is not a budget. It is not a recommendation. It is not a financial plan. It is the maximum amount of debt they are willing to let you take on based on your income and existing obligations. It is a ceiling, and building your life at the ceiling is one of the most effective ways to become house poor that has ever been invented. My name is Bill, and today we're going to find out exactly how much house you can actually afford in 2026. Not the bank's number, your number, the one that accounts for your real life, your real expenses, and the real cost of owning a home that nobody puts in the listing description. Let's get into it.
Let's start with how the bank calculated Ryan's pre-approval number, because understanding the formula is the first step to understanding why it is not the number you should use. Lenders use a metric called the debt-to-income ratio, or DTI. The calculation is simple. They take all of your monthly debt payments, credit cards, car loans, student loans, and the proposed new mortgage, and divide that total by your gross monthly income, your pre-tax income, not what you take home, what you earn before the government takes its share. Most conventional lenders will approve a mortgage up to a total DTI of 43% to 45%. Some will go higher. What this means in practice is that if Ryan earns $85,000 a year, his gross monthly income is about $7,083. 43% of that is $3,046. If his existing debt payments, car loans, student loans, total about $600 a month, the lender subtracts that from the $3,046 and determines he can afford a mortgage payment of up to about $2,446 a month. At current 30-year fixed rates of around 6.8%, a $2,446 monthly principal and interest payment supports a loan of approximately $385,000 to $420,000, depending on the specific rate and terms. There's your $420,000 pre-approval. Now, here's what that calculation did not include: property taxes, homeowners insurance, private mortgage insurance if Ryan puts less than 20% down, which most first-time buyers do, HOA fees if the property has them, and here's the one that really gets me: maintenance. The actual ongoing cost of keeping a physical structure from falling apart around you. None of these are in the DTI calculation. None of them. The lender looked at Ryan's income and his existing debts, and that is it. Everything else is Ryan's problem. And here's why the lender is not being malicious when they do this. They're being a business. The lender makes money when Ryan borrows money. The more Ryan borrows, the more the lender earns. The lender is not trying to hurt Ryan, but the lender is also not trying to make sure Ryan can afford to go to dinner on a Friday night or replace his roof in 2031. Those are simply not the lender's problem. They are Ryan's.
So let's build the real monthly cost of that $409,000 house from the ground up, because the number Ryan has in his head right now is not the real number. It is the mortgage payment, and the mortgage payment is just the beginning. Principal and interest. Ryan puts 10% down on the $409,000 house. That's $40,900 down, leaving a loan of $368,100. At a 30-year fixed rate of 6.8%, his monthly principal and interest payment is approximately $2,408. That's the number in Ryan's head. That's the number he told his girlfriend. That's the number they divided by 2 when they talked about splitting costs. But we're not done. Property taxes. The national average effective property tax rate is about 1.1% of the home's assessed value per year. On a $409,000 home, that is approximately $4,500 a year, or $375 a month. In high-tax states like New Jersey, Illinois, or Texas, this number can easily double. In New Jersey, the effective rate averages around 2.2%. which on a $409,000 home would run about $750 a month in property taxes alone. But let's use the national average, $375 a month. Added to the mortgage payment, Ryan is now at $2,783. Homeowners insurance. The national average for a home in this price range is approximately $150 to $175 a month. Let's use $160. Ryan is now at $2,943.
Private mortgage insurance. Ryan put 10% down, which means he has less than 20% equity. Lenders require PMI until equity reaches 20%. PMI typically runs 0.5% to 1.5% of the loan amount annually. On Ryan's $368,100 loan at 1%, that's $368 a year, or about $31 a month. Ryan is now at $2,974. Utilities. The average American household spends about $200 to $300 a month on utilities directly related to the home. Electric, gas, water, trash. A house is typically more expensive to heat and cool than an apartment. Let's use $250 a month. Ryan is now at $3,224. Maintenance. This is the one nobody talks about. The rule of thumb used by most financial planners is to budget 1% of the home's value per year for maintenance and repairs. On a $409,000 home, that is $4,090 a year, or $341 a month. This is not optional money. This is the roof that needs replacing in year 12, the water heater that goes out in year 6, the HVAC system, the driveway, the gutters, the windows. A physical structure requires ongoing capital to maintain, and if you don't budget for it, you will either let the house deteriorate or you will fund repairs with credit card debt. Ryan is now at $3,565 a month. Let me say that number out loud. $3,565 a month to own a $409,000 house on an $85,000 salary. That is 50% of Ryan's gross monthly income, and it is 61% of his net monthly income after taxes. The bank approved him, the math does not. Now let's talk about the rules, because there are several guidelines in personal finance that exist specifically to protect people from doing exactly what Ryan is about to do. And I want to walk through each one because they are widely cited and also widely misunderstood. The 28% rule. You've probably heard this one. The traditional guideline says that your monthly housing costs should not exceed 28% of your gross monthly income. At Ryan's $85,000 salary, 28% of his gross monthly income of $7,083 is $1,983, not $2,408, not $3,565, $1,983. The mortgage payment alone is $425 over the 28% threshold, before we add a single dollar of taxes, insurance, or maintenance. But here's the version of the 28% rule that I actually think is more useful. Apply it to your net income, not your gross, because you don't live on your gross income. You live on what you take home. Ryan's net monthly income after federal taxes, state taxes, and payroll taxes on $85,000 is approximately $5,700. 28% of $5,700 is $1,596 a month for all housing costs. The real total monthly cost of that $409,000 house is $3,565. That's more than double the 28% guideline applied to his real income. The 20% down payment rule. Conventional wisdom says put 20% down to avoid PMI and to enter the transaction with meaningful equity. On a $409,000 home, that is $81,800 before closing costs. Closing costs on a home in this price range will typically run another $8,000 to $12,000. So Ryan needs approximately $90,000 to $94,000 in cash before he can buy this house the right way. Does he have that? The email didn't ask.
The emergency fund rule. Before buying a home, you should have a fully funded emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses in addition to your down payment and closing costs, not instead of, in addition to, because the moment you buy a home, your monthly expenses go up and your emergency fund requirements go up with them. A $3,565 monthly housing cost alone means Ryan needs $10,695 to $21,390 in emergency funds just to cover housing if something goes wrong. The bank did not ask about this either. The total debt rule. Even more conservative financial planners suggest total housing costs, including all of the above, should not exceed 25% of your net take-home pay. At Ryan's net income of $5,700, that is $1,425 a month for total housing. The real cost of this house is 2.5 times that number. I am not telling Ryan he can never buy a house. I am telling him that this house, at this price, on his current income will cost him his financial flexibility, his retirement contributions, his emergency fund, and his ability to absorb any unexpected expense for the foreseeable future. The bank approved him. That is not the same thing as the math working.
So what can Ryan actually afford? And what can you actually afford? Let me give you a real framework. Instead of a bank ceiling, here is the honest home price table at current 2026 mortgage rates of approximately 6.8% on a 30-year fixed, applying the 28% of net income rule to total housing costs, including taxes, insurance, and maintenance. If your household income is $60,000 a year, your net monthly take-home is approximately $4,200. 28% of that is $1,176 for all housing costs. At current rates and average tax and insurance costs, the home price that fits within that budget is approximately $140,000 to $160,000. In most major metro areas, that buys you very little. In many mid-sized cities and rural markets, it is a real house. If your household income is $80,000 a year, your net take-home is approximately $5,400. 28% is $1,512. The home price that fits is approximately $190,000 to $270,000. If your household income is $100,000 a year, your net take-home is approximately $6,800. 28% is $1,820. The home price that fits is approximately $240,000 to $270,000. If your household income is $120,000 a year, your net take-home is approximately $7,600. 28% is $2,128. The home price that fits is approximately $280,000 to $230,000. If your household income is $150,000 a year, your net take-home is approximately $9,200, $2,576. The home price that fits is approximately $370,000 to $420,000. I want you to sit with those numbers for a moment, because if you live in a city where the median home price is $500,000 or $600,000 or $800,000, what those numbers tell you is not that you are failing. What they tell you is that homeownership in that city requires a household income that most households in that city do not have. This is not a personal finance problem. It is a housing supply problem. And no amount of budgeting discipline fixes a market where the median home costs 8 times the median income. Now, let's talk about renting, because there is an enormous cultural pressure in America to own rather than rent. Renting is seen as throwing money away. Owning is seen as building wealth. And like most things that everybody believes, the reality is considerably more complicated. Renting is not throwing money away. You are exchanging money for housing. That is not throwing it away. That is buying a service. You are also buying flexibility. Freedom from maintenance costs, freedom from property tax exposure, and freedom from the transaction costs of buying and selling a property. Here are the transaction costs most people forget when they calculate whether buying beats renting. When you buy a home, you pay 2 to 5% of the purchase price in closing costs. When you sell, you typically pay 5% to 6% in real estate agent commissions, plus additional closing costs. On a $409,000 home, that is roughly $8,000 to $20,000 going in and $20,000 to $25,000 going out. Combined transaction costs of $28,000 to $45,000 before you have built a single dollar of equity through price appreciation. This means you need to stay in the home long enough for appreciation and equity buildup to exceed those transaction costs before the buy decision beats the rent decision. In most markets, that break-even point is somewhere between 4 and 7 years. If you are not confident you will stay for at least 5 years, the math of buying versus renting is not automatically in your favor. It depends entirely on your specific market, your specific rent alternative, and your specific timeline. The down payment opportunity cost is the other calculation nobody runs. Ryan has $40,900 to put down on this house. If instead he kept renting and invested that $40,900 in a broad market index fund at a 7% average annual return, in 10 years, that $49,000 grows to approximately
$90,500. In 20 years, it grows to approximately $158,000. The down payment is not free money. It is capital with an opportunity cost. Sometimes homeownership is the better use of that capital. Sometimes it is not. But you cannot make that judgment honestly without running both sides of the calculation. I am not telling you to rent forever. Homeownership at the right price, in the right market, at the right time in your financial life is one of the most powerful wealth-building tools available to an ordinary person. But homeownership at the wrong price, bought because a bank said yes and the internet said renting is for people who haven't figured it out yet, is one of the most effective ways to stay financially stuck for a decade.
So what does Ryan actually do? Not the theoretical version, the real Monday morning version. First, Ryan calculates his real number before he falls in love with a house. He takes his net monthly take-home income, not his gross, his actual deposit. He multiplies it by 28%. That is his total monthly housing budget, including taxes, insurance, maintenance, and all other housing costs. He backs into the home price from that number, not the other way around. Second, Ryan builds the full monthly cost of any home he seriously considers before he schedules a showing. He adds up the mortgage payment, the property taxes for that specific address, which he can find on the county assessor's website, the insurance estimate, the PMI if applicable, and 1% of the home value divided by 12 for maintenance. If that number exceeds his 28% budget, he does not schedule the showing. The house is not in his range regardless of what the listing price says. Third, Ryan builds his down payment and closing cost fund before he buys. He targets 20% down plus closing costs plus a fully funded post-purchase emergency fund. He does not drain his savings to zero to buy a house. The day you buy a home is not the day to have zero cash. It is the day you need the most cash because things start breaking immediately. Fourth, Ryan decides his minimum stay before he buys. If he is not confident he will stay in the home for at least 5 years, he does the break-even analysis for his specific market. He runs the rent versus buy comparison honestly and chooses the option that actually wins the math, not the option that wins the cultural approval. Back to Ryan. He's still outside that house in the car. The lights in the windows are warm. The deck looks exactly like the one they always talked about. And the pre-approval email is still glowing on his phone. Here's what I want Ryan to know. The house is not the problem. The dream is not the problem. The problem is making a $400,000 decision in the emotional glow of a pre-approval letter without ever building the real number. The bank gave him a ceiling. He needs a budget. Because here's the thing about house poor that nobody tells you before you sign. It is not dramatic. It doesn't feel like a crisis. It just feels like every month is a little tight. Every repair is a small emergency. Every vacation gets canceled. Every retirement contribution gets deferred just one more year. The house is beautiful, and it is slowly consuming every other financial goal you had. Not because you made a catastrophic decision, because you made a decision at the ceiling instead of at the number. The pre-approval is not the answer to how much house you can afford. It is the first question. The answer comes from your net income, your full monthly cost calculation, your cash reserves, and your honest answer about how long you are staying. Ryan can probably buy a house. Maybe not this one, maybe not yet, but he can build toward it correctly instead of arriving at it wrong and spending the next decade wondering why the dream feels like a trap. The lights in those windows are warm. They'll still be warm when the math works.